Cloud.
Go. I accepted it.
Okay, good morning, Fernando.
Good morning.
My name is Eve Berry, and I am with Nautilus Leadership Services, and we're here today to speak with um, a dear friend and colleague of mine, Fernando Morales, who is the Executive Director of Southwestern Connecticut Area Health Education Center. So, Fernando, thank you for being willing to take time out of your busy schedule to help with this podcast. So, welcome.
Thanks, Eve. Thank you so much. I'm really honored to be part of this and really to kind of give my view on community building and how I've been able to utilize it in not only in a personal matter, but also and most importantly, I think in my agency
Great.
and so that's really and I thank you for inviting me to this.
Well, appreciate your participation and your perspective. Um, so tell us just a little bit about your organization, what you do at Southwestern AHEC.
Sure. Our agency, Southwestern AHEC. AHEC is short for Area Health Education Center. You just originally earlier said it, but we're really focused on addressing public health issues, and specifically in the aspect of education, and really providing communities, providing even providers, really the most up-to-date information that's really going to be relevant for them to assure that they know and understand what's happening. I mean, obviously, a perfect example is our COVID pandemic. We've been in the forefront in really developing material to for folks to really be aware of those areas of hesitancy, or I don't want to take the vaccine. And so we provide all this information. Again, that's just one snippet, but we also have a really robust Americorps program. For those of you that don't know what that means, this is a program that really it embodies the ability to teach young individuals to really perhaps pursue a health career in any type of medical field, or any kind of field that they want to be part of. And we start as early as high school, and then we continue on with bringing information to those that are already in college. And then we have some other experiential trainings that we do within that Americorps program. But it's really an amazing program. And again, it's all providing the education and making people have people make the informed decision as to what they want to do. Obviously our Office of Minority Health grant, which is something that we just recently received, maybe like a year and a half ago, to really address trauma and adverse childhood experiences, and really have an opportunity for people to understand the importance. And again, I'll reiterate, with COVID, I know that there's several things that have come up in relation to really addressing trauma and any of those issues of isolation and all these different things. So this program really is geared to really help with that, utilizing a community health worker, kind of like a component to it, or model, to have those frontline workers be out there being the ones that are working with these communities and providing the best support. In line with that, we also do, and we're doing really well right now in the development. Sorry, let me retract that. Not development, but we developed with the help of Eve, a CHW curriculum to really. I want to call that the agency's kind of like flagship program, because it's really it's a 90-hour program that really prepares individuals that want to perhaps pursue the path of community health worker training, and they themselves become CHWs for short, and then perhaps pursue additional areas and careers. And again, being that it's in our state, where it's a certified program, and I think all these elements are really important in really making sure that we're in the community, addressing health issues, addressing things that are impacting everybody, as a whole. So yeah, I think in a nutshell, that's pretty much, unless
Mhm.
that's something, I don't know, but that sounds
Right.
pretty accurate.
Yes, it's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on this interview is that uh, a lot of the other people we're talking to as part of this podcast series are people who have participated in community building over the years, sometimes more recently, sometimes for many years. And I'm especially interested in talking with folks who have been able to take the community building model, the things that you learn through community building, and actually take it out into your organization and into the community, as you say. And that's really what you're telling me is that you have these programs that are really facing the community and bringing knowledge, skills, and we'll talk about this a little more, the practices of community building. So let's just get a little bit of history. When did you first learn about community building and how have you been involved?
Oh my goodness, that's a good question. I think, it was, I would say around 2005, 2006, when I really started learning about community building. I did not know about it prior to that. And really, it was so new to me back then, and I didn't really kind of grasp the concept of it. And just to give you some perspective, obviously, when we're in these kinds of groups, any groups, and based on my background in substance use and counseling, and so for me, it was always when we attended these kind of groups with other community clients, it was more like we need to find a solution, right? And that was the mindset. But
Mhm.
this approach, it was a totally different thing. It was to you know come together in a circle. And and I started learning what it meant when they were saying, if you're moved to speak. That is something that I never really knew. When If I wanted to speak, I was a counselor, I was going to speak. And because I wanted to fix something. And that's how it is in our fields. But in community building, it's more of coming together and looking beyond everybody's, whomever they are, and just looking beyond them and seeing them as human beings. And that was one of the things that really struck me about learning, and started to learn. I'm still learning. I'm not an expert. I don't intend to be. uh, but it's something that is a continuous effort to really stay focused in what community building is.
Mhm. So what was it that um, interested you in bringing what you've learned from community building into your organization?
Sure. I'm I think one of the things that I'm going to say about that is, this all started back in the I would say, when I was an executive director of a previous agency, where there was a lot of chaos in there. And it was interesting because, again, learning community building allowed me to really look at how people were, how chaotic things could be. And it really allowed me to open up myself to look at that. And so as I became executive director of this other agency, I saw the chaos. I saw this whole, sets, and it was a pretty kind of a little bit larger organization the one that I run now. But I could really see that. And I began to introduce that, and it was really a really bad experience. In the sense that, and I'm being honest, because people were not ready to really grasp or even begin to understand, what it meant to be in community, what it meant to really be in a group that everybody, amongst all their differences, can still come together and really focus on a task, or focus on a way of being. And so, I so that was my first experience, here in an organizational component, trying to put that in there. And it was hard. It was definitely hard. So and then coming into this agency, being that it was smaller, I felt more confident, I think, by then. Again, we're talking about 20 2015 to now, and I felt confident, and I was able to discern really the way in this agency that I'm in now, how receptive the people were being, at least under my direction, if you will. I didn't come in as an executive director here. I came as a deputy or an assistant director, and there was some chaos in there and stuff. But then when I took over the leadership, I really felt that it was very important for me to, number one, we're all team players, and that's how I see it. I'm not the leader. I'm just the one that has the title, but I'm just like everybody else, and we all are in the same level of being able to talk genuinely without any things that might, it's just, we have a really good approach here in this agency right now. And I really thank community building for that, because that allowed me to, and if I maybe give you a quick example for, one of the things that I in meetings, when I'm in my meetings with my team, the staff, I'm very particular with what I choose as far as words. I don't like the word staff. I like team members. Everything is inclusive. I like to include everybody in obviously in certain decision making tasks, because I think with that it's they take ownership as well. And I think that's very important, I'm being asked to be part of something that's relevant to the agency, and I really find that to be very valuable. So everything I try, I mean, obviously there's certain aspects as an executive director, you're the one, the buck stops with me, but as a whole, they are part of every decision making that happens in this agency, and I think that's important, because it makes them valuable. It makes them, be part of something they want to be a part of, and so yeah, so that's the way I'm, that's really important to me. And community building, again, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it really has provided that ability for me to be that, to really bring people together.
I'm hearing a couple things in what you're saying. One is that just the way that you see yourself leading the organization is, in many ways, you're more of a community building facilitator than a big boss. So, and then just what you just mentioned is that example is the principle in community building of being inclusive. You've really translated into decision making for the organization. And what are some of the other ways that you've infused or integrated community building into the work that you're doing, both as a team and out in the community?
Well, I think that's a good question, because I mean, obviously we have our agency, structure, our community building structure here, and it's vibrant, and it's well received. But even in the way when I speak with partners in different, from different agencies, I bring that with me as well. I use that as a method, and I'll give you a perfect example. Again, this happened just what was it, last week or a couple of weeks ago, that we were in a meeting, and I said, okay, we're going to be doing this approach, and I would love to have everybody's input in that, because I don't want to be the only one to make that decision, and Eve, it is not weakness, is, because some people might see that as that, but it's not. It's about working together for a common cause, and that's what's important about community building, is that it has to come from your heart, and it's powerful. It's a powerful thing to have. And, I use it in my community, with other partners. I built strong relationships because of community building, with other agencies, even people that I was told, well, they're difficult to get along with. It's like, well, let's just work this, because it's not a matter of, oh, well, this person is being this way or that way. It's like, I'm here every time I meet someone, or a partner or an agency. I look beyond what I've been hearing from others. I focus on what is it that I need to, that person and I, or as a team, we can do together. And again, it has its good points, and sometimes it's not going to have its good points. Maybe the person is having some major, personal stuff that we it's going to take a little bit for them to maybe come to terms with that. But for me, it's always that smile. It's always coming genuine, and not and focusing on really what's going to be the most important thing, and is that it's building that relationship, and moving that agenda, whatever it might be, forward.
Yeah, I noticed, as you know, I've been part of some of your meetings at your organization, and one thing I noticed is that you start certain meetings with a check-in, and I remember one time you just started with the agenda, and one of the members said, "Wait a minute, what about our check-in?" So could you just describe how you've been able to do that, and the impact it's had with your staff?
Sure. My goodness, thank you. Thanks. Thank you for reminding me about that. It was not an intentional move. In my mind, I was focused on, I guess something to do with work, and I just said, okay, let's just get, let's start the agenda, and I totally skipped the check-in part. And I think that, as when you build something into a process, it's expected now. And I'm not saying expected in a bad way. It's just something that others are already expecting, that, if I'm in a staff meeting, if you will, and I'm always saying, I'm with a smile, and that's just, I'm not being fake. This is just who I am. But when I don't do that, which is rare, that I maybe once or twice in staff meetings, I've been very serious, and boy, that is felt. It's felt because it's not part of the norm, and I appreciated that individual who came back and said, wait a minute, let me check you here. You forgot the the check-in. That's an important piece of starting any kind of meeting, I think, is kind of coming in and and really, just and again, being moved to speak. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, but it's part of a process that we keep as a norm in our daily, lives, if you will, with agency wide, anyway, agency wise.
So my understanding is that when you open up a meeting with your staff, that you begin with a check-in. And what does the check-in involve? For those
Well,
that might not understand what a check-in is, how is
sure.
that?
Sure. I mean, I think, at least for me, I can speak for my agency, or for the, when I start a meeting, is going to say, okay, so let's have a check-in, right? And and people are, it can be, very quiet for a little bit, because people are probably processing or whatever, but it's something that, it allows people to kind of like, empty whatever they might be feeling at that moment, and it's great for them to just let it go. And so when we have the check-ins with our partner meetings, it's like that. It's like, okay, well, how, this, what's going on, and again, it's not about me telling anybody what's going on with you. No, it's just about, okay, let's just have a check-in. And then those that feel moved to speak are going to speak. Okay, well, today is not blah blah blah. So they kind of speak more or less of what's going on, and then from there, it can take 15-20 minutes, and then we begin the meeting. And then but we're able to be open about things, and I think that's the good part. In the staff meetings, as partner, in the staff meetings is really much the same thing, and it's a matter of like, just speaking up. And it's been difficult sometimes, of course, because and I do know a few in my staff that really don't like to talk, and that's okay. It's not them, they're not forced to talk, And I've heard people, oh goodness, I don't want to do a check-in today. I've heard that, and that's okay. That's the way they're feeling, because they're in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, they must be going through something, and who am I to disturb that safe space they're in right now? you know
Mhm. Mhm.
so it's a matter of knowing. And usually what happens afterwards is they'll send me an email or they'll call me, and they'll tell me, can we talk? This is why I was feeling this way. And it's like nothing to be up. And my response is always nothing to apologize about. It's This is the way it is, and you don't, until you're ready to say anything, then you're fine. So don't worry. And that's important, that they feel that they're not going to get judged, that they're not going to get ridiculed, if you will, or be looked at awkwardly, just
Mhm.
because they're feeling a certain way.
So it sounds like you're really letting people be themselves, and that it's okay to be vulnerable and to having a bad day, and also by that check-in, it sounds like you're giving people the space to get present to what's going on, kind of put aside, you mentioned emptying, letting go of those what might be getting in the way for people. So that seems like a pretty powerful
Well,
practice in an organization.
absolutely
Simple, but powerful.
powerful, because again, there's things that need to get done. And if someone is in a position, or at that moment, perhaps they're going through something that might hinder whatever needs to be completed, right? So it's always good to have that openness. And I think it goes, and again, just because it works, it's worked. And there's days that it does work, and there's days that it just doesn't work. But it's a continuous thing for me.
Mhm.
Agency, I'm not saying that it's all perfect and nice, but and I think a big factor is the Zoom's environment that we're in. That's also a challenge,
Mhm.
in trying to
Sure.
meet people where they're at, and things like that. But nevertheless, we do it through Zoom. And the few times that we've been in the office, we'll gather and we'll enjoy ourselves, because that's the way it is. We're not here to just work 8:30 to 5. We're here to also be humans. We have faults, and it's okay. And I'm not gonna judge anybody, and no one in the agency is gonna judge anybody for that.
Well, that it sounds very welcoming to me. And you mentioned earlier that you talked about your flagship program, the community health worker. I know your organization's been involved for a long time and was instrumental in getting community health worker certification passed in Connecticut. And I know you have a very extensive community health worker initiative going on. And um, tell us how you see the connection between community health workers and community building principles and practices.
I definitely see a connection in there. Um,
And
Community,
tell people what community health workers are, just in case they're not
sure,
familiar with community
right.
health.
A community health worker, for those folks that might not be aware of that title, is really it's an umbrella title for individuals that are either outreach workers, case managers, lay workers, all these different titles that are out there that people might have, that would fall under the umbrella of a community health worker. There's over 187 titles throughout the country that talk about, all these things that make up that community health worker. What are community health workers? They are the ones that are in the front lines in a community, addressing issues, social determinants of health, all the things that really are important for. They are trusted members of a community. So incorporating the principles of community building into that is, I think, a very powerful approach in really them having the ability to know how to speak to people, number one, and do it in a genuine way. And I want to go back a little bit into this whole, you just mentioned that, Eve, with Southwestern AHEC receiving, or we were instrumental in the development of the CHW Community Health Worker Certification. During that time, one of the things that happened is that the state of Connecticut received over $45 million to really, improve healthcare in our state. And within that millions of dollars, a small portion was set aside to develop the CHW certification. And one of the things that happened also is that during we had this program had different components, obviously, as far as the state innovation model. And one of them was to really embed community health workers within a healthcare system. And why did they do that? The reason why they did that is to really probably even incorporate unknowingly that community building piece. Because out of this whole team of doctors and nurses and social workers, there's this community health worker who's from the community, of the community, and it is able to provide this other health providers the real reasons why maybe some individuals are not able to, keep up with their appointments, or, and so, but they did it in a way, and it was a very successful approach, I think, that the state of Connecticut took in this case to really build within that system of care an actual community person that would be able to really speak to those clients and then bring them back to health, or back to to have their healthcare care needs met. So, but all the in my agency, all the community health workers that are involved, that are here, we have at least approximately, or at least like 6 community health workers here. They utilize inadvertently, they utilize community building principles when they're out there meeting with their clients. Even, granted, COVID has been a factor of not having a lot of outreach work, but they're out there in the community, and they're really engaging the community in a way that this is making them understand, we need to know what the needs of this community is before we even think that we know what's happening, and so by them being out there and utilizing these things as simple as, asking a question in a way that's going to bring a response from that member, or from a community, if it's a forum, it's so important, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's very interesting. So, I know that that you mentioned a little bit about how you've introduced this into the organization, and as we know, in the community building process, people sit in a circle for 2 days or whatever it is, and work through the stages of a sense of community in the group. And in the organization, it's very different. It's not, I know you do retreats, and there's probably sometimes when people actually sit in a circle, but how does it look different in an organizational setting? You're not sitting in a circle. What does it look like in the day-to-day to be doing the community building? You already mentioned the check-ins, so.
Right. Well, you're right. It's different. Well, maybe pre-COVID, we did sit in circles, but it was true. It was not, planned. It was just part of how we would be able to see each other when we were in a staff meeting, for example. But I think inadvertently I was proposing community building principles in that, in utilizing a circle format, if you will. Mm-hmm. And that was and it was very uncomfortable for them in the beginning, because it's more like everybody sees each other, right? And then obviously with our remote whatever, where we kind of do the same thing, but in a virtual environment, really. Mm-hmm. We're still in a circle, I guess, theoretically, but it's different in the sense that we introduce pieces. I've introduced pieces of the principles of the community building piece, right? I don't, it's not just an old circle and we're all just sitting there. It's kind of like actively introducing those things, but it's done in a way, and I want to say it's thanks to you, Eve, because you're the one that's taught me a lot about this, and again, and I've learned in the circles, it's a matter uh, you know figuring out or discerning what's going to be the approach, and then do it in a way that it's not going to seem that it's an actual community building circle, or principle, and that's been really helpful to me, because it's like, okay, well, I'm going to introduce these little bits and pieces of it, and again, the check-in is one of them. When we're in person, we'll sit down in a circle. I'm always bringing up, if you're moved to speak, please do so. Using these terms that are
Mhm.
going to be important for people to really, and I'm not just in the partners, but even in our staff meetings. It's very important to me, and I also have them use that within their, especially the managers within their teams as well, utilizing those things, because I think it's important that everybody feels that they're part of something that's relevant. And in an agency, that's a big thing. If a staff person is not feeling relevant, then there's going to be turnover. In the 2 years since I've been here, there's been no turnover in my agency.
Mhm.
You know,
Interesting.
and besides those that started and that they felt that it was not a good fit for them, and that was like 2 months after they were hired, so maybe who knows, but that was their reason for that. But at least the ones that are established right now, those that have been through thick and thin with me during the COVID times, that shows their commitment, and it shows, and they've even shared with me, some of the staff. Every time I see you, I get happy, and every time I see you, so good to see you, because you're always smiling, and that's important things, because as a leader, you have to show that you are, just like they are. It doesn't matter, but you also cannot be in this mood that's going to be negative and bring hostility, and that's so important to me, so important.
Mhm. Yeah, it's one thing I've noticed about organizations in general, workplaces, is that most of them, they're the foundation that they rest on is in community building terminology, we call it pseudo community, where people are kind of being fake and
Yeah,
pretending and putting on a good front, and underneath it there's a lot of, you mentioned it earlier, chaos,
yeah,
the people really not being happy, not being satisfied with the workplace, complaining behind the scenes, all of those kinds of things. And really that's for many organizations, that's kind of the norm.
sure.
And what I've noticed about what you've done with your organization is you've made, rather than pseudo community be the norm, you've made community building, a sense of community being the norm. So that's the foundation it's built on.
Right.
And then within that, it's not that there's not chaos, because there's certainly, I'm sure,
Sure.
points of difference, but it gets resolved pretty quickly. And I think, just because I'm pretty aware of your work, is that you've really made the idea of emptying something that's okay to do.
Yeah.
So when chaos happens, people empty.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the default of a sense of community. So, which is really, to me, that's what I call an extraordinary organization as opposed to an ordinary organization. So I've really seen how you've made that work. And I think what you mentioned about the turnover, low turnover, is a good example of that.
Right.
Because and also the level of trust that that people have, that you have of your employees, that, hey, they're working remotely, but but it's not like you're trying to enforce compliance or anything. You're accepting people's full responsibility for doing their work and being responsible, accountable people. And so I don't see you having the regular, if you will, performance issues that often exist. And I know you certainly had in that last position that you were in. So,
and can I respond to that real quick?
Please.
I mean, you brought up such an important point, because when the pandemic began, and mind you, we've been closed since March 20th of 2020. Just as of like 6 months ago is when we started doing a hybrid opening. But anyway, one of the things that I was hearing from everybody else, and I'm not talking about my staff, I'm talking more about other directors and even the UConn School of Medicine, making comments to me. Well, they need to report to you on a daily basis. And I just looked at them and I said, you've got to be kidding me. I said, I'm going to trust them that they're going to do what they need to do. I said, and I will not, because I saw that as micromanaging, and I'm not a micromanager, number one. I don't have the time to be looking at everybody to see what they're doing. That's crazy, but, so it's worked out in a way that I know they're doing, and let me tell you how I know that they know. Let me tell you how I know, rather, that they're doing their job, because I see all the reports that come out, and it's showing that they're doing their job. So that tells me, we meet once a week, every other week. Actually, now it's once a month, I think. I'm sorry, every other week for our bi-weekly check-in. And and the reason why I changed it is because once a week is not enough time for things to happen. But let's do it every other week. And I know they're doing their job. I know that I'm not going to be there micromanaging them. If something happens that they're not performing, I'll hear about it too. Because this is a small community. Connecticut is not a very big state, so eventually I'll hear something. And then let's come together and let's talk. It's not going to be, well, you're in trouble, let's just talk what's going on. And to a previous comment you said about people emptying, I've had staff empty, and on a personal level with me, and they were afraid that I was going to be upset about it. I said, no, this is all part of working here, is expressing what you're feeling. I said, because it's not about anything else but you feeling comfortable here, and yeah, of course, and it was something to do with insurance and stuff like that, but they were venting, and I felt I'm so proud that they had the ability to actually tell me about it, not just keep it bottled up and start building that pseudo stuff that happens when things start bottled up and moving up.
Well, that's a great example of another one of the principles that you've integrated, which is in the circle, we talk about voicing displeasure in the group.
Yeah.
So to basically bringing the issue forward and having the courage to bring it up. Yeah. And that's really, so people feel that they could voice what they really feel. If they're concerned about something, you're not going to punish them. You're going to just hear them out and go from there. And then that way they get to let go of some of their frustration or their discomfort, but also there's a welcoming person to say, okay, how do we resolve this? So,
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's about developing or finding a solution, at least in that case. And, obviously it was found. I changed insurance companies, already. So, that was already in my mind anyways, but, it allowed me to really understand, the things that they were going through as well. So that's very important.
So one last question I want to just explore with you before we wrap up, and that is, you're leader of an organization. You've introduced this into the culture of the organization. When should a leader consider introducing community building principles, practices into their organization? When would you recommend that a leader do that?
I started introducing this even before I was the executive director of this agency. As the assistant director, I started introducing some of the principles because again, coming here, I saw the whole pseudo community that we were talking about earlier, and it really made me think that I needed, and so I would do it with my staff, with the people that I supervised. We would start, because everything before was just about this person needs to be told this, everything you're doing, and it's like, oh goodness, it was like a bad taste in my mouth. So so I started it as soon as I became aware of it, and started, but slowly introducing it. It wasn't like, okay, everything's going to be community built, because people are not going to know what that means. But I would say, as soon, I think any leader will discern what's going on within they know what's going on with their organization. And if they want to bring change, and it might be hard because maybe it's intrinsic already, it might be, a culture, if you will, of the organization. But it's something that I think it's not impossible. But to bring it in as I would personally, I would have brought it in earlier. But I did it in what I thought was my best time, was to slowly introducing some of the principles, and and I guess a big challenge actually is, assuring that the leader, the executive director, the CEO, the president, whatever they might be, that they are willing to, be at the ready to probably have, I don't want to call it setbacks, but maybe kind of like feel maybe how the staff are going to be taking this, if you know what I mean. Because it's a hard task, if you have a large group. I think my advantage was mine was a very small group when I started doing this, so it allowed to build that community building component of it. So as others came in, other new staff came in, that was the culture already, and and they were, for the lack of a better term, they were acculturated into community building. But if you're starting with a already a chaotic staff, or it might be a little bit more challenging. But if you can at least think about introducing some of those principles of listening without judgment, and things like that, maybe it might be a way for them to introduce it and add more as they go along. But as soon as they feel comfortable, I think they should start doing that.
So you're really saying that the leader has to be willing to participate, him or herself,
Absolutely.
and self-examine, and also possibly take responsibility for a culture that's already been created that may not be as healthy as it might be.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it would be, so that's a perfect example. Absolutely. Because we need to take ownership of our own things, as leaders, and be willing to be vulnerable as well. And again, I don't have a problem being vulnerable with staff. That's part of things. When I share information with them, it's sharing wholeheartedly what I want for the agency, and I want them to be in this journey with me. So anyway, so that's where I think that a leader should start.
Well, and that's a real leadership trait, is understanding that vulnerability is a strength, not a weakness, and it helps build trust and openness. Well, I want to just close with a little example that we haven't talked about explicitly, but I know is the case, is that this, you mentioned this Office of Minority Health grant that you have, and which is, I think you call it Be the Change, is that right? Be the Change.
Connecticut, yeah.
Which comes from Gandhi's expression, be the change you want to see in the world. So, and my understanding is that project really came out of the experience of community building that people had in a community health worker training,
Correct.
that they then decided they wanted to be the change, meaning they wanted to help heal their own trauma and help prevent it in others.
Correct.
And so out of that, the grant idea grew. Is that right?
That's correct. That's correct. And, you know, and it's interesting that you mentioned that because, you know, obviously when I started providing the CHW training, me myself, I just thought about this, but it's such a norm for me now that I introduced the principles of community building within our, at least in the trainings that I did, you know, and that was prior to having an instructor be here and be the one that provides this, you know, but you know, the group dynamic was incredible in really coming together. And it's interesting because we developed a video of a community health worker training where they spoke of what it entailed, and inadvertently or advertently they share their story of really, you know, why they wanted to be here, you know, why they wanted to be in this class. You know, it goes beyond just learning about the core competencies. It's about building community. I mean, they talk about things like that in that video. So it really shows that, I mean, I was doing it because it's part of me now. It's funny how interesting that I say that because, but it's almost like, you know, in my mind, it's just the way it is, right? And so it's interesting that you say that, you know, and this Be the Change is a perfect example of Be the Change Connecticut. It's a perfect example of building that community, you know, just make it part of it, and how it brought everybody together. And then how it allowed them to really think about, okay, we can, it's not just with this little circle, we can go beyond that, you know, and, you know, so it allowed them to really see a totally different perspective that they were not even thinking about, you know, and you know, as an agency, we got, you know, local funding for that. And then we got federal funding to really make it a statewide approach by utilizing that CHW model to incorporate those and, you know, community building approaches to it. So, you know, it's great. I mean, I think community building is an incredible tool, if you will, to really incorporate it in not only your organizations, but everything in your surroundings. It just makes it an incredible experience for people.
I have a friend, Joe DeMars, and he says life is better in the circle. so
Agreed.
you're really speaking to that as well. So, yeah. Well, just in closing, I want to thank you. And could you give us your website address, so in case people want to look into
sure.
your agency? Sure. Just if you would share what that is.
Sure. It's www.swctahec.org.
Okay, so swctahec.org.
Correct. Yes.
So that's for Southwestern Connecticut. Okay, got it. Great. And that if people could see that little video on there,
it's on there.
About the Be the Change. Yeah. You might as well be. I saw that video and I said, oh, sounds like they're talking about community building, except they were talking about the class. So
they had a lot of the, you know, it was interesting. That's true. Yeah, you can go in there and check out the video. It's in I believe it's under the training program tab, I believe it is. And
great.
One of those two anyway.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Very informative, and thanks. Keep up with the good work.
Thank you so much, Eve. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Fernando. Bye.
Bye. Is that all?